What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Cleveland Pulse. A little bit different here today. We doing the intro. Justin's with me. We're gonna bring you an OTA video. Just a little update here. Nothing too crazy. But first, before we get into it, make sure you like, make sure you subscribe, drop a comment down below if you like what you hear. If you don't like what you hear, and follow us over on Twitter at Pulse Cleveland. We've had some good growth. I've been following some more people in the community recently. But Justin, before we get into this, how are you doing?
I'm good. OTA starting up, so we're getting closer and closer to the football season starting. Also, a little note that I did see, uh, Governor DeWine, 100%
Yes,
fans allowed to be back in the stadium for this season, so that's
let's
great to
go.
hear. Obviously, a hard thing to bite the bullet on last year with such a resurgence of the team, but I think all that hype will definitely transfer into the stadium. Home game, Houston Texans. So I'm sure that's going to be a great atmosphere, and I can't wait to be there.
Yeah, most definitely. That's great news. That's something that I saw and, totally forgot to even text you about. But I think that was almost somewhat assumed at this point,
Yeah.
hopefully if everything goes well. But for today, this is actually going to be based around a Kevin Stefanski press conference from yesterday, June the 2nd. So it's about a 15 or 16-minute long press conference. I'll have it linked down below in the description if you guys want to check it out. But I thought our media did a good job. I know me and you talk about, and other people in the community talk about how the Cleveland sports media is not that good. You did have questions from, your local Tony Grossies and Mary Kay Cabot's, but I thought they did a good job. So I know you haven't really seen it besides just a couple of quotes here and there, but
Yeah.
I'm going to start you off with a pretty basic question, which I thought was interesting because one of the reporters did ask Kevin Stefanski if there's a possibility that Anthony Walker could be one of the two green dots on defense. So, for those who don't know, the green dots are people who have direct communication with coaches inside of their helmet. So, the quarterback has on offense for every team in the league, and there's two on defense. A lot of people think coming into this year that Anthony Walker or John Johnson III might be able to have that green dot. Anthony Walker has been there all week at OTAs. John Johnson III hasn't been, which, yes, these are voluntary workouts, which we'll talk about, more later, how much that means, how much of an impact that is. But what do you think about Anthony Walker? Earlier prediction, does he get the green dot or not?
I think it's clear cut that he gets it. It's typically your Mike linebacker in the defense that is calling, what's being called from the sideline and everything. We did hear a lot about how John Johnson was the mouthpiece for the Rams defense last year. And obviously, with being able to have two of those, oftentimes, you want the person who's going to be on the field the most being that person that gets that green dot. And so having a guy back in coverage be one of those players, I think John Johnson will still have a very good chance of being one of those players because safeties don't typically rotate out that often. So as long as he's a healthy, go for every game, I'm going to say that Anthony Walker and him are probably going to play upwards to 90% of all of our snaps. So it just makes sense for those two to kind of get those green dots and be the mouthpieces.
I absolutely agree. I think Anthony Walker hopefully should take a lot of snaps for us. And I think he hopefully has the experience to line people up when it
Yeah.
comes to, just shifting along with the defense. But like we said before starting this recording, Jadeveon Clowney and John Johnson III, the only two defensive players that have not checked in. So Myles Garrett being there and Denzel Ward, I think that's just totally great for just how many people that we have that are new.
Yeah.
I think that that's just a good sign. But I thought it was interesting of how many questions they asked about the defense and that Kevin Stefanski, he was saying Anthony Walker is as advertised as far as he's seen, even though Kevin Stefanski is the offensive mind. I mean, obviously,
Yeah.
you don't hear a lot from Joe Woods just in the sense of interviews or things like that. But how do you think it feels to be Kevin Stefanski and you have guys, like Myles Garrett and Denzel Ward showing up for OTAs?
Obviously, for Kevin, obviously he's got to work with the offense a lot more. But to have, leaders, Myles, obviously a captain, Denzel, one of the top players at his position and on the team for good reason, having those guys back for essentially what is the regrouping of this defense is something that's very important. And obviously, with a lot of the guys that we assume are just going to be new starters. Obviously, we talked about Clowney not being there and John Johnson not being there, guys that we think are going to be projected starters, obviously for good reasons. We signed them to big contracts, but for the rest of the rookies and for the other guys that we brought in, it's just good to kind of get those guys in position and, getting acquainted with guys like Denzel and Myles, who we expect to be the leaders on that defensive side of the ball, even if they're not, like we were talking about with John Johnson and Anthony Walker being the green dots and being able to get the play calls from the sideline. So obviously it's huge. And it's even great to have guys like Grant Delpit and Greedy Williams, reuniting for the first time on the field since last year. Just great to have a lot of those guys back and kind of just, the weakest part of our game last year was our defense, and having a lot of these guys come in and realize that and know that they need to get acquainted with everyone. It's just a fantastic thing to have them all there.
Yeah, and that's a good point. Grant Delpit definitely is just seen as a rookie, but I mean, even at this point, you could throw in, Greedy Williams as being a rookie. I was watching one of Derek's videos, DF Sports. Go check him out if you have not, but he was saying the same thing about how, Greedy Williams has played a year, obviously, but he really didn't play like a huge consistent role. He played kind of here and there, but this is like another rookie season for Greedy Williams. But moving over to the offensive side of the ball, one thing I sent you earlier today, or maybe even yesterday, Demetric Felton working out as a wide receiver. What I thought was interesting is that Stefanski said some days he's been in the running back meetings and some days he's been in the wide receiver meetings. Now, this is preemptive, but there's really nothing else to talk about. Between Demetric Felton and Anthony Schwartz, how do you feel that impacts the future of Jarvis Landry and Odell Beckham Jr. on this Browns roster?
I thought you were going to ask me how does that affect like who's going to actually get playing time between the two of those. So
well, that's tough, but I think looking out to the future is a little bit better, just because I think that there's like a definite statement you can make about OBJ and Jarvis like at this point.
Yeah, well, I even saw someone do their own like roster or depth chart projection, and obviously Anthony Schwartz is at the bottom of the wide receiver group, and they have them keeping 6 guys on the active roster and Demetric Felton as the running back 3. With him going over to playing wide receiver, I think it's really just kind of like, it's really, I hate to like bring this up outside of like the Browns and everything, but with the Jaguars, everyone's freaking out about the guy that they drafted, Etienne from Clemson, that Urban had him playing wide receiver. It's not really about like, and obviously they're rookies and they should be learning the playbook for their positions first of all, but for these guys that are drafted in the later rounds as kind of like utility guys, sorry about that. They have to learn to be diverse, and you kind of have that Kareem Hunt feeling with Demetric Felton, where he's going to need to flex out to the wide receiver position and kind of be able to work and be able to catch those outside balls. So in terms of Jarvis Landry and Odell, again, it's going to be one of those things where I don't think it takes an effect on this season in terms of what happens to those two. I don't think it affects their playing time. I don't think it really affects anything that happens this season. However, obviously with a lot of guys needing to be re-signed next year, there is a lot of cap issue at that wide receiver position that will probably need to be taken care of. So Demetric Felton getting that time there is important just to see how he can pan out. So, but obviously another scenario that you could look at is Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. Both those guys contracts are due next year. So could be really more of a conversation for those two.
Absolutely. But I honestly think that it's not unpopular to say at this point that it's very unlikely that Jarvis and OBJ will both be on the roster next year. I think that that's pretty much the common thought around the roster, is that this is maybe their last go together, pending some cuts of some nature, but they really just make too much money. So I thought it was interesting that they're working Felton at the wide receiver spot, because Dearness Johnson is there. He's been at OTAs. So, and his production was for his touches last year, he did not play bad at all. So
he started off really hot, and unfortunately when Nick Chubb went out, he did not do as well as everyone was hoping he'd do. So honestly, he'll probably get practice squatted or cut, unfortunately.
Yeah, probably. That's pretty much the consensus, especially with drafting Felton. But I think we're gonna come to maybe the peak of this video. Hopefully people stick around for this conversation because it's a little bit backloaded, but
Yeah.
it's an overarching position. Do OTAs matter? Now, I think if you look at it as far as quantifying it, does the work now really matter toward the season? I would agree with most people in the sense that if you just said the consensus was that these are voluntary, Kevin Stefanski kept saying that, they kept pressing him, people in the media asking him questions, these people aren't here, Baker isn't here. So how does that make you feel, Kevin? And he just kept saying, these are voluntary. These are voluntary. So as far as these, practices, these walkthroughs, these, scheme talks, as far as that affecting the actual regular season, I would agree with most people that it doesn't. But what the place that I'm coming from, because I am the Baker hater of this channel, I am, and when I have a chance to talk about Baker, I think everybody loves talking about Baker. It might be the most talked about player in the league. So, but when you have the chance to come to OTAs, this is what my problem with it. Here's my problem with it. Then I'll let you talk.
Absolutely.
I know that he probably doesn't feel like this about how his narrative is that he has not had a concrete system as far as, talking about his being disadvantaged. He came into the league under a bad system. Then he had to go to Freddie Kitchens, whatever. But if that's your narrative, if you're arguing that, and then you don't see him show up to OTAs, missing out on reps that he could take with Kevin Stefanski in a concrete system, then you have a little bit of, you're basically arguing yourself there, in my opinion. Thoughts?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I actually want to make a point about something very interesting that I saw, that a player apparently was getting a COVID shot at OTAs. They were giving out COVID shots, which is something that they went into a little bit of depth about, that like coming to OTAs was an easy way to get the COVID shot and like a way to kind of circumvent all the aspects of like how COVID affects the season. And it's a really in-depth thing. If someone wants to go look that up, I thought it was really interesting. But going back to your point about OTAs, being optional and just being a thing about quarterbacks. Honestly, you look around the league and you look around the AFC North, you mentioned it with Big Ben. I think when you sent that, I think you really should have more pointed to Lamar Jackson, who, was at OTAs with, his new wide receiver. The only problem with like the argument that you're making is just that the entire offense is not there. And so it's something that they had agreed upon before, it ever happened, before we got to this point a couple months ago, that they weren't going to come. Some of them weren't going to come. Obviously, the entire offense is not there. Starting offense, at least, is not there. And to say that it's taking reps away from, Baker and Kevin getting onto the same page, I honestly look at it the other way in terms of like, well, it's giving other players the opportunity to actually get those reps that are needed, like rookies, practice squad guys, and, whoever's going to be that third backup quarterback. I don't even know that Case Keenum is there. But, I think
the third string is there. Kyle Luetta. I think he's been there.
Yeah. So I can absolutely understand the point about, he should be there. He's a quarterback. He's supposed to be there. But they did have an entire group workout, the offensive starters, wide receivers, except for Odell. And so, they were all in Florida. They practiced for a little bit. It's not like a huge deal. I don't think it because they're going to come to training camp, and training camp's going to be, ones versus ones and twos versus twos, just how it should be. Does it kind of just, does Kevin Stefanski probably not want to say what he's really thinking is, I would like to have Baker Mayfield here, and I would like to have, all these other starters here, but obviously optional. The league does it for a reason. And, JC Treader, who is the NFLPA president, advised to not have OTAs. So it's an interesting take. It's obviously something you could very much argue about. Ben Roethlisberger, Lamar Jackson at OTAs, I don't know about. Joe Burrow's probably at OTAs with his bum knee, but who knows? So, but
Yeah, I
it's an
just think it's
interesting take.
interesting. Yeah, it's definitely interesting. But because I've just been, you see Big Ben at OTAs, you do see Lamar Jackson at OTAs. You have good offensive turnout, apparently, in Kansas City, in Indianapolis, other AFC teams that could be and probably will be very good.
Yeah.
So I just think it's interesting. Somebody did ask Kevin if this was like if the defense was coming this week and the offense was coming next week, because there is another week of OTAs, and he kind of had like positive body language. Like he didn't say anything like definitive, but they could be coming next week. And, I could just be jumping the gun a little bit, but I've been thinking about it like this all day. As far as OTAs are like extra credit.
Yeah.
Now, if you have a good grade, some people have good grades, have great grades, and they still want extra credit. You see Myles Garrett there, you see Denzel Ward there, you see a future Hall of Famer like Big Ben Roethlisberger there, and they're still at OTAs. Yeah. So that's kind of where I see it. Where if the offense comes next week, it's a totally different story, because then that makes more sense if he at least comes. Yeah. But if he really wanted to be there, if he really wanted to, get these reps with Stefanski, I know how you said that it makes sense to get other people reps, but still getting there's really no excuse this year. We had, the Zoom excuse last year, how he doesn't really have, concrete walkthroughs, but it's like, this is a contract year for you, bro. Like, and there's been no extension talk. I haven't even seen leaks of it yet. So, I mean, maybe that's on purpose. Maybe his agent is saying, let's bet on Baker one more year if he has, some MVP caliber season, then we could really get him big money. But it's like, we're not even in talks with him, and he's missing OTAs. Yes, they are optional. Yes, they are voluntary. And should I be reading this much into it? No, but there's really nothing else.
But you make a great point about, the kind of like the optional extra credit point. It's like, do you want to get in the good graces of Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski to be able to, if for say you don't have that spectacular season that everyone is hoping that you have, things like when you go back and look, was he at OTAs? Did he make the effort to come to OTAs when he didn't have to? Those are things that you could absolutely point back to in the future, but down the line, if we win a Super Bowl and whatever, you also look back down the line, it's like, all right, wasn't at OTAs, it didn't really matter that much. So it's really a back and forth thing that we could really get into. But obviously at this point, if he comes next week, and it's kind of a moot point. So, but obviously the defense really needs to learn their stuff, and the offense, for the most part, they've already known their stuff. So we'll see how it ends up, but I think we'll be fine. I play on the air of we'll wait and see for the preseason.
All right, and one last thing. This is probably the best part, and once again, I will link this video down below, and I can shoot it your way too. But it's multiple like the same guy asked Kevin twice in a row about Myles Garrett with posting basketball videos, and the first time Stefanski, he chuckled once, and he was like, yeah, Myles is retired, and then it came up again, and he did not seem thrilled at all. He was like, Myles is retired. You won't be seeing any of those. You won't be seeing videos like that anymore. And I was just like, oh my God, maybe that's why he's there this week. He's in the doghouse.
Yeah, I mean, it's a scary thing. I mean, the thing is, it's like watching Michael Jordan play against me. It would be it would be insanely stupid to just watch me get demolished by a dude who's obviously taller, bigger, way better at the sport than I am. But Myles is just legit playing against ants. But he keeps going up for the dunks, and they don't want to have a situation like the guy in Denver who got hurt in off training all that stuff. So, but yeah, I mean, I'm sure Kevin was, watched some of those videos and was like, man, don't come down on that knee some way. So right. I can definitely get where he was sweating a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, hopefully everything's all right, but I mean, it's off season, but definitely sick highlights, but I forgot about that off season rule about getting hurt. I mean, that's a whole different thing. So I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah. But I think that's going to wrap this video up for us. We're going to brainstorm. We might be doing some more highlight videos soon, but we're going to have content for you guys. So stay strapped in, make sure you subscribe if you have not already. And we'll be coming with more Cleveland content in the future, but we'll catch you in the next one. Peace.
Peace.